evening. So my name is Sila Watt-Cloutier. I was born in Coudrock in Nunavik, northern part of Quebec, and I traveled only by dog team the first 10 years of my life on the icy highways, the frozen water, in a small community where we lived very traditionally, hunting, fishing, and gathering. And the North, of course, is very different today from the time that I was growing up, in a very small, knit community where we had gone, literally, I think, as Inuit from ice age to space age in one lifetime. And so the tumultuous changes, of course, have left a lot of wounds in our communities. Issues such as climate change, food insecurity, and suicides are major concerns, but it wasn't always that way. And in my living memory, I recall a time when it was not that way. Hunting, for us, of course, is not a sport. Along with the technical aspect, our hunt is about teaching our youth how to become proficient providers, how to become natural conservationists, and efficient seamstresses for clothing that fit for the cold. And a process of the hunt itself is very powerful in its teachings of life and character skills such as patience, judgment, endurance, persistence, courage, resiliency, which all lead to development of your judgment, of sound judgment, and to become wise in all that you do. So these skills are very transferable to the modern world, and in fact, in a transitioning world such as ours, is very much a requirement in order for our young people to survive and continue to thrive. But now, with the changes that are happening in our environment and our climate, our ability to pass down these powerful messages and learnings are being minimized, where institutional schooling has all but eliminated a lot of these necessary skills. And so I've learned through the many talks that I give across the country in Canada, very few people know about the context of why we struggle so much in the Arctic and the historical traumas of our communities, starting from the forced relocations of families into the high Arctic in the name of sovereignty, the collapse of the sealskin market in the 60s, stripping the dignity of our hunters to provide for their families, which I know this province completely resonates with and understands. And children separated from their families to be sent away for school. I was one of them. I was 10 when I was sent away. Culture suppression certainly has diminished our identity and our sense of self-worth and the control over our lives. Addiction and violence are symptoms of the traumas that have been endured. Because the first suicide in my world, in my community, was when I was 18. So these are all new phenomena that are occurring, and today they have become devastatingly common. But this is not the natural state of our Inuit world. Here we were still reeling from that first wave of changes and trauma, and finally coming to recognize the root of the breakdown of our society, only to realize another wave of tumultuous change was upon us. And when climatic changes started to impact the Arctic ice, making it precarious, it brought more stressors in an already very stressed situation. The ice is a very big part of our identity. I know we're here to talk about water, but for us in the Arctic, water in its solid form has as much meaning and life for us as fluid water itself. It's our highways, it is our training ground, in essence, it's our life force, and something we knew to be as permanent as the rivers and mountains in southern parts of Canada. And one has to remember that the ice for us is about mobility and transportation, and when it becomes precarious, it becomes an issue of safety and security first and foremost. And the climatic changes have only added more stress and anxiety to a community with a historical context of trauma. So when other parts of the country are struck with major environmental and natural disasters, we see it on TV, we read about it in the papers, we hear about it on the radio, that communities and first responders come together in urgent ways to help. There's always an outpouring of support and generosity, but imagine the equivalent level of emergency every single day without end, where you feel a loss of what is happening all around you. Imagine no clean drinking water, not for a week or two, but for decades in some of the Aboriginal communities. Imagine being poisoned from afar in the 80s, when our Inuit women had to think twice about nursing their babies as a result of toxins that end up in the Arctic waters, ending up in our food chain. Imagine women in your community going missing with no explanation for decades. The constant worry about our children who are at high risk for self-destruction due to the intergenerational legacies of trauma, and the structural racism in our institutions which make you feel less than what you're meant to be day in, day out. What if a constant state of emergency became the new normal? What kind of psychological impact might that have on the people in your community? A history of this violence on our communities at the human level now mirrors the violence we're inflicting upon our planet. That's the connection I want to make. I understand that the economy is volatile right now, but growing the economy in the same unsustainable way causes irreparable damage to the atmosphere, and it's forcing the planet to react with violent storms and other erratic events. This is not unlike the child who suffered trauma. Without care, a space to heal, and effective coping mechanisms, self-destructive behavior is inevitable. What we're seeing in our communities and in our atmosphere are not abnormal behaviors. What we are seeing are perfectly normal reactions to extremely abnormal circumstances. So climate change is happening now in the Arctic and affecting every other part in the world. As it is the cooling system for the planet, we hear about the water problems here, we heard earlier. The Arctic ice is the planet's air conditioner, and there's a blanket of greenhouse gas emissions that are now heating up our planet way too high, and this climate, or this AC, this air conditioner is breaking down. So you can't afford, nobody can now afford to ignore our struggles in the Arctic, because what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. The right to be cold and thrive, as we have for millennia, is connected to everybody else's right to a healthy environment and access to water. We need to come together to address these challenges now, otherwise, where will it end? There will be more climate impacts coming to many other doorsteps in the form of floods, droughts, wildfire, water shortages, and more. And how will the world learn to cope with these massive changes? As I've said much more recently, we can't just think our way out of this crisis. We've tried politics, economy, and technology. That hasn't worked very well. We need to reassure society that change will not punish economy, but rather provide an opportunity to flourish in the future, creating a better world. If we truly want to reconcile as Canadians, because we have been trying through the Truth and Reconciliation process, we've got to feel our way through this crisis and rediscover, in a sense, that everything matters and everything is connected. You know, we protect what we love. And that's what we've been trying to do. We love our homeland. We love that ice, the cold, and what it gives to us. So let's all fall in love with our land, with our waters, with our air, with different cultures of the world, with peoples of the world. We can come together on the human level to deal with these issues of water, whether in liquid form or solid form, and our common atmosphere that connects us all. Then from that place of the heart, understanding and compassion, we can help to counter the causes and effects of human trauma of our Aboriginal communities, as well as our climate, which is beyond changes. It's not just climate changes, it's now in trauma as well. So let's learn more about and support the community of Clyde River, for example, the small community in Nunavut, who is fighting the good fight against seismic testing in the waters off the coast of Baffin Island, and whose case will be heard, by the way, by the Supreme Court of Canada in the coming months. Let's learn more about the bravery and the courage of that small community. Let's support the efforts of my fellow Inuit from Labrador, close to here, in their attempt to convince the leaders in power that the Muskrat Falls Hydro Dam will contaminate the country food that thousands of Labrador Inuit rely on and threaten Inuit rights, as well as their human rights to culture, health, and livelihoods. And let's learn more about the Memorial University-led Smart Ice, which is a sea ice information service to support safer ice travel for Inuit by Inuit, changing climate and shipping conditions. You can learn more about this, by the way, which has just come out on the CBC Online. So we are all in this together, not just here in our own country, but all of us, as we struggle in the Arctic to maintain a way of life and protect the future for our children. We do so for everyone else as well. And we are in this together, and together we've got this. Nakomiki.